repository in your data center. He's given some really good examples of this is how to have your production repo, this is how to have your development repo, how to maintain your development repo when you're taking updates and packages. And he goes through all different scenarios there, using ZFS to take snapshots, etc., etc. So he has worked through all of that, and that's a really good article to read from a repository management point of view.
It is, it's a really good paper.
Good, yeah. So, you know, Albert's been sort of working as a sidekick for the last couple of years on that, and will continue to do so. Again, this is one of the things that I try to do with my team is that, you know, we have the nerdy developers producing this stuff, whether it's InfiniBand or IPS or whatever, or Zones or ZFS, and then we have the theoretical experience, and then we have the practical experience. And what I try and do with my team is try to bridge that gap and plug any holes in, you know, how normal people think as opposed to how the developer people think.
Have you seen any of the work going on in package build? And what do you think of that? And is that the kind of thing that would be, you know, from the open source community that's useful enough for commercial Solaris that might get pulled in? And that's basically the ability to generate a package with a like RPM build with a spec file and effectively a source package and a spec file and compile it.
So we have the ability to build your packages with PKG send. You can just say, have a proto area with all your binaries in, then by default just say PKG send, pick up that proto area, it will generate you a minimal manifest which allows you to do stuff. Then you can edit that to put extra features in with more dependencies and so forth. So again,
so you don't necessarily think there's a reason to have another interface to something that you're already
no.
I mean, in the latest Solaris release, I think packaging has got a bit more chatty, so there's a bit more information.
Yeah, so when you're doing the upgrade, when you're doing updates, it actually tells you what it's doing, and instead of doing this, by default, with the Solaris 11 release, it said creating plan, you have a little spinning wheel, you sit there for ages, and you go, okay, it's nice that it's making a creating a plan, but I don't actually know what it's doing, but now it's a little bit more verbose and saying, looking at looking at mediators, looking at various bits and pieces, so it tells you what steps it's going through to actually say, actually package is actually doing a lot more to your system to ensure that it's consistent, which is something that packaging in the SVR4 world didn't do. Yeah. That's why it's called the image packaging system. We're actually making sure that the image as a whole, as a Solaris instance, is going to be consistent throughout its life cycle, so that you don't get broken package dependencies or patch dependencies. And again, that's why we have this plan going through telling you what it's doing. But yes, it is a bit more chatty.
Yeah, it's massively, IPS is massively more intelligent.
It's interesting to say that you don't have customers, sometimes don't update systems or reboot their systems for 24 months or more. Yeah. Is that, I mean, it seems to be these days that you have to reboot your system every month if you follow the strict rules. I mean, so that's a thing that customers are complaining, and not usually complaining about that. Is something we say we don't want to reboot. We want to patch, but we don't want to reboot.
Well, obviously we want to minimize downtime. I mean, clearly, that's, we want to minimize downtime, especially with, virtualized systems where you end up, maybe instead of, 6 or 7 different servers running, one for each business unit, you end up with one system with either zones or LDOMs or a combination for 6 or 7 business units. And then, as a system then trying to coordinate downtime across 6 or 7 business units is pretty much impossible. So clearly, we want to minimize downtime whenever possible. And that will continue to be a focus going forward.
So one of the points that Jerry made there in the slides is you can unlock the packages, but from user-land corporation, which delivers all the FOS software. We know we get a lot of security defects in the FOS software simply because the source is out there, people can look at it and hack it and do whatever. You can unlock the user-land corporation as a whole and just keep that moving forward. And that doesn't contain any reboot stuff. So you could do it that way, as opposed to doing each individual package.
So the user land as an environment by itself is done in a segregated way so that you can unlock it by itself.
Yes.
So there's lots of ways you can do that. I mean, obviously, if redundancy is important, clustered systems or whatever else, so you can have a failover and do a rolling upgrade as well. But BEADM is as I say, like a much better, much more integrated version of live upgrade. you know, where you can work on a production system, you're working on the alternative boot environment, and then, you know, once you're ready, it's a single reboot at the end to activate it.
And a much faster reboot these days as well. Very quick.
Yeah, you said the patches are, you know, tested by you. Not every, unlike under Solaris 10, where virtually everybody could have a different system. Now they're all tested, and you tested them as one. When you get somebody like me who comes along and needs to remove InfiniBand driver, for example, doesn't that totally screw that up?
No, because as I said, the dependencies are very, very strictly controlled. So whether it's patch dependencies or package dependencies in IPS, you know, that's very strictly controlled, and there's a lot of automated code to make sure we identify the dependencies correctly. So if anything depends on that ID driver, it won't allow you to remove it. Either you have to recurse through everything that depends upon it, so you don't leave something hanging in space. And if there's nothing that depends upon it, then you can do what you like with it. Okay, so the package dependencies will take care of that. Actually, that's probably worth looking at here. It's back. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there, but with the OSNet incorporation, the OSNet incorporation currently has 1,007 packages in it, but that's core Solaris. So out of that, there's actually only 13 packages that can be unlocked. Everything else is independent, everything else depends upon that. So you can unlock SendMail, for example, and update that independently. Because obviously that's SendMail and Bind, you know, two of the most security problematic issues that are out there. I'm not too sure why that's not working now. But in the appendix of this, I do have some details of how to find out what packages can be unlocked. So, for example, in the X consolidation, there's 310 packages. 102 of them cannot be unlocked from X because that's what defines X. But the other ones you can update independently, unlock them and update them independently. But again, IPS controls what can be locked, what cannot be unlocked. And again, there's commands to find out what can be locked or unlocked and so on.
Really, with interaction with zones, amazing. Dim zones, package updates or whatever, patch and read it. But if what sort of, how does IPS help me there? Does it help me, or do we know, trying to run, how differently can have the different zones on the same machine? Do they? So I know it sounds a bit of a dumb question.
No, it's actually an interesting question. So one of the key things we want with zones is keep them minimal. So we want to make sure that they're cheap to maintain. So we keep the software footprint in a zone to as small as possible. So that's one thing. Now we also have a relationships between the software that is in the zone to the software that's in the global zone. And we tag that within IPS, say parent, and it's got to be synced image, so we have the tag in there saying this package is allowed in the global zone, it's allowed in the non-global zone, and it's actually linked to the software version of that package in the global zone. And there's if you have a look at the dependencies, it's typed as parent. We always keep those two in sync. So, for example, libc, we've got to make sure the libc in the zone is the same as what's running in the non-global zone. However, we then realise there's other packages, say Firefox, Thunderbird, your favourite other component, which you might just want to say, I don't want it in the global zone, I want it in the non-global zone, and I want to update it independently of whatever I'm doing in the global zone. You're free to do that. So there's no strict relationship there, so you can update that individually. So, did that answer the question?
That helps me a bit there. I mean, I must admit, I'm more Solaris 10 at the moment.
Yeah.
So, but that's useful, in some ways it's useful. Now, Solaris 10, is there any more restrictions on that? So if you have Firefox, let's say, in the global zone, do you have the same version in the non-global zone, or not?
From a patching architecture, I think you do. I must admit, I'm not.
Sorry,
familiar with this.
If it's a sparse enough, yeah.
Yeah.
That's just full root.
Yeah, that makes sense because then you patch individually.
We're going to add on to that question, because historically in Solaris 10, the requirement was that your global zone always had to be uprev from your local zone, and you could do things like an attach -u to bring everything in sync, and it would then patch it at the same level as your global zone. But with having rules around patch sets with kind of the 2-year thing, is there any kind of finite rule on how big the deviation can be between the global zone and the local zone? I mean, I know you said there were certain requirements, and obviously the kernel has to be the same. But aside from that, have you applied the same rules around like the 2 years between an IDR and the base set in zones?
So a zone is just another way of packaging of software. You see it's just like that. So the same rules apply to the zone there.
Okay.
So, it's branded zones in Solaris 11.
So a Solaris 10 zone in Solaris 11, a branded zone. Patch whatever you want to do with that.
And there's Solaris 11 zones?
Yes.
Are they branded?
No. They are branded, but they're branded Solaris zones.
Don't we have parallel updates of zones in S11?
Parallel updates of zones is a feature in S11.1.
Okay.
That's a new feature. Why you want to use S11.1.
Yeah. So again, as in Solaris 10, originally zones updates or zone patching was sequential. Then we put in a feature, parallel zones patching, and we can do that in parallel. Similarly in S11, at the moment it's sequential, but coming very soon, it'll be parallel.
I read the difference guide. I don't remember it verbatim, but other than the parallel patching, are there any other IPS-specific features that are noteworthy between 11.11 and the 11.1 release?
Performance-wise, it's a lot faster. So a lot of work has gone into make it more performant, because that's one of the feedback saying you run a command, it takes a long time to complete. But now a lot of work did go into fixing that in 11.1. So part of that was moving the Python interpreter. There was some work done to actually rebuild how Python is built on Spark machines, especially. They found they build it in this particular way, it actually performs a lot better from a Python perspective. Just changing some of the algorithms used. So they changed the underlying transport mechanism that IPS uses, so that goes a lot faster.
Is Python considered one of the core elements of the system?
It is, because packaging uses it. Yep.
Well, you've not gone to version 3 still?
No, version 2.6.
Is the package state of the machine, is that something that's generated on the fly?
That's actually kept within var PKG, so you have effectively the cache in there of what packages are stored. Then there's also sort of the list of packages. So what it would do is when you're looking at the consistency of the system, so when you do click into verify, it says, I'll look at the MD5 or the alpha sums of the binaries on the system, compare them with the alpha sums of that packaging, and then if they're different, it says, oh, something's wrong here, then that's how it maintains consistency.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about sort of configuration management. Baseline systems and saying the system is correct.
Yeah.
So,
but you can also, we also know that some files are going to change, so it's also we allow
they're outside of this.
Yeah.
One more question at the back. And then
I just to make a comment for people that actually haven't used the package before. I mean, a sort of upgrade on Solaris 10 might take anything from 15 minutes to an hour or so, depending on the system speed, disk speed, and how much you're doing. On a package update, even on not a very fast system on Solaris 11, is like 2 minutes. So okay, you're talking about you speed it up in 11.1, but even in 11, you're still talking about massive performance. A massive speed up overall. It's worth realising how much faster it is in any case.
And I think since we have food next door, I'm going to cut it short because I know there's going to be lots of questions. I said earlier in the year we did have an IPS talk like Chris, so it's worth visiting those slides. And by sounds, it's still an interesting topic, so maybe we'll get an IPS, specific IPS talking again with any of the new releases of Solaris. But next year maybe.
And certainly, you know, in the meantime, feel free to send questions to me, jerryhaskins@oracle.com, or if you want an intelligent answer, peter.dennis@oracle.com, and we'll answer that, and we can add that to the FAQ, and I'll be adding this to the blog soon. But also just on the whole, the more high-level stuff of this trust that we're finding here of simplification, of just trying to follow the KISS principle. I'm really interested in getting your feedback, either by email or afterwards. Just, is that right? Does that feel right to you? Does that feel wrong? Bring back the 4,500 hatches. You know, I would really like your feedback on that. Thanks.
Yeah, yes, I mean, as I said, thank you very much. And so there's food and refreshments next door.